For now, we will start with the logo presentation. Okay, so probably a lot of you have heard of logo before, and always logo for us is the perfect solution that fills the gap between a contactor old-fashioned control panel and a PLC-based control panel. And as you can see here, this is the typical old-fashioned way of control, using the typical relays and contactors, in addition to maybe hardware timers and counter relays. And it was, if the application is too complicated to be handled in this way, then again you use a PLC-based system. Now, Logo comes somewhere in the middle. It provides most of the functionalities offered by the PLC, all the simple functionalities, and it is much more simpler than the hardware setup. Now, when we use Logo, this way means that these hardware connections that are done in the old-fashioned method of doing control panels is now done by interconnections in the software itself. And it means also that this Logo offers a very great start into the automation world for anyone who is seeking to go through the PLC technology. So it is not complicated and difficult to learn, and also to start building. So it's very easy, very simple. It can be, it can be taught in a couple of days. You can build your application in a couple of days as well. And because it has a lot of applications into the building automation, it complies to the noise emission limit for domestic area. And also, if you have noticed, also it is designed in the design of the miniature circuit breakers. So it fits directly into distribution boards in buildings without the need to have special enclosures for them. All right, so what are the main highlights of Logo that make it so distinctive for us? The most important thing that you also have to keep in mind all the time, that Logo is designed to be simple. And keeping this in mind, we always have the software for Logo is simple as well. So usually it's a very light software that does not require a high spec computer to run. It can run on Windows, Linux or Mac operating system as well. And it's also very easy to learn. So this is very important for us when it comes to the hardware and also to the software, that it is very easy for a first-time user to be able to learn it on his own, just without any classroom training. Second thing, because of this reduced size and it fits into the distribution ports, it is very space saving, especially in the depth, which is quite small, which leads of course to a smaller enclosures and less wiring. And of course, because it's simple, you have a shorter time to build your application. It has a very optimized list of items, which means that you don't need to keep a lot of stock. As we will see, we don't have a lot, various options with Logo. It is intended to be in this way, so it's simple to plan the stock. And as I mentioned, we don't need much training really to learn about logo and start building your application. And of course, to allow for scalability in the application, it comes in a modular expandable fashion. So you have the base module, and in case you need further functionality or further number of inputs and outputs, you can always expand by adding expansion modules. Even in the case of communication, we have some expansions possible as well. And last thing is that the integrated display and buttons on the logo logic module allows us to have messages displayed and adjust some parameters during the CPU runtime. And also it allows for, let's say, simple program creation using this display and the buttons. So if the program's, let's say, not simple, we recommend that you go with the software and build your application using the software, and then you download your program into Logo. Right, let's have a look at the system components. So what is the portfolio of Logo? The heart of the system here in Logo is the logic module. So this is the main part, and we have 8 different variations from Logo logic module that we will see in the next slides. Now, this logic module can be enough for you to do a full application. So without anything else, just this item is enough to do a complete application. So it has display, it has buttons, it has digital inputs, it has digital outputs, it can have analog inputs. So it can do completely a full application. But in case it is not enough and we need more inputs and outputs, of course we have several digital and analog input and output expansion modules that we will also have a closer look at. On the other hand, we have also some supplementary modules, such as a switch, Ethernet switch module that comes in the design of Logo. This also comes in 2 different variants. We have also power supplies that comes in the design of Logo that have different voltage output rating as well and current. And we have several communication expansion options with Logo as well for connecting to mobile network, for remote monitoring and control, and also we have another communication module for connecting Logo into the KNX network, usually found in building automations. Last is the Logo text display. This is a small HMI designed only to work with Logo logic module. It's very similar in functionality as the integrated display of the logic module, but the idea that this can be mounted on a panel door, so it can be visible from outside the cabinet. Alright, so now let's jump into each part of the system individually. Let's have a look at the logic modules. We have 2 types of logic modules. We have what we call Logo Basic, and this is the most common one, which has a display and buttons. But we have also a logic module, which we call Logo Pure, that does not have the integrated display or the buttons. This is a logic module. This is not an input-output module. This is a logic module. So this is a controller. And for both of them, always on the top here you have 8 digital inputs, input 1 to input 8. Then here you have the power supply terminals, which is supplying the voltage to the logo. On the bottom here you have always 4 digital outputs. Of course, they can be different types. We will see now what are the different types of inputs and outputs. It is not visible, but it is here. Always logo comes with an Ethernet port for both versions. And also we have a slot for a micro SD card that has some applications as well. It's not mandatory. This SD card is optional. It has certain uses that we will see also in the upcoming slides. The pure version has a run stop LED to show you the status of the logo logic module. However, we don't have it in the logo basic module because we have integrated display and we can see actually the run stop status on the display itself. So what are the different types that we have seen before in the previous slide? We have seen that we have 8 different versions of this logic module. So we have seen now that we have 2 types, basic and pure. But why do we have 8 variants? The reason is that we have different variants with different power supply type and digital input type and digital output type to suit different applications. You can see that here we have the same type but with a small O after that. This indicates a pure version of the logic module. So this is always the basic version. The one that has a small O after it is the logo pure version. And you can see that we have 4 from each of them. We have 4 different types. That's why we have 8 different variants. And the first one is the 1224 RCE. This one you can supply it, you can power it on by supplying 12 to or 24 volt DC, and you will notice that digital inputs follows always the power supply type and rating. So always the digital, also the digital inputs, if you are using 12, then you must use the same power supply to supply the digital input loops. If it is 24, you use 24. And digital outputs are relay type with a 10 amp rating. The second one is 24 RCE. This one is interesting. This is very useful in building automation where they commonly use, they don't have any, let's say, AC to DC power supply. They use actual transformers to get from 230 AC into actually 24 volt AC. So this is very common there. And the power supply can be 24 volt AC or DC. Similarly, the digital inputs and the outputs are relay type with 10 amp rating. The third one is the 24 CE type. This is purely DC with 24 volt only on the power supply and digital inputs, and it is without relays on the output side. So the outputs are transistor type with maximum 0.3 amps load. The last one is the 230 RCE. So this one is offers also direct connection to the power supply from anywhere. Yeah, so from the 120 to 230 volt AC or DC as well. You can power it on and you can connect your inputs, and the outputs are relay type with maximum 10 amp load. Now these are the different types, and we have one last point to highlight here, that These two versions of Logo logic module have a nice option, which is these 8 digital inputs. Some of them can be used as analog inputs in the measuring range of 0 to 10 volt DC. Now, this option is not available for all, as you can see. It's mainly available for the logic modules that have a DC supply, because the analog input measuring circuit requires a DC to work. But it's a very nice option, and as you can see, you can either choose to not use them, or you can choose 2, so you will have 6 digital inputs and 2 analog inputs, or you can choose 4, and then in that case you have 4 digital inputs and 4 analog inputs. So this is a nice option with these 2 versions, that you are free to use it as it fits to your application. Alright, so now let's jump to the digital expansion modules in particular. For digital expansion modules, we have actually 2 types as well. We have what we call DM8, which is digital module 8, and we have DM16. Now, the only difference between them, actually, both of them has inputs and outputs. The only difference is the number of inputs and outputs. So this one has total 8 channels, which means 4 inputs and 4 outputs. This one has total 16 channels, which means 8 inputs and 8 outputs. And again, just like before, you will see that these digital inputs are here on the top. The power supply terminals are always here on the top left of the module. Outputs are always at the bottom for digital, so 4 or 8 depending on the module. And there is a run stop LED for diagnostics, so you would know the status of the expansion card itself. And lastly, we have this slide interlock on the module, and this is actually how we connect the expansion module to the logic module, or to the module to its left. So simply this slide interlock, once the expansion module is fitted into the rail using a screwdriver, this is pushed to the left, so it will establish the link to the module to its left. And similar to the logic modules before, we have also for the 4 different types, also 4 different expansion modules. And you can see here that except for the 1224 type, we have DM8 and DM16 for all the other types. For 1224, we have only DM8 that has a 1224 volt DC input, power supply and digital inputs, and a relay type output. Please just be careful. The relay output rating for the expansion modules is 5 amps. It is not 10 amps, similar to the logic module. So you can see here that this is identical actually to the rating and type of the logic module, which means that you need also to be, of course, you need to decide which rating you are going to use, which type of power supply inputs and outputs, and according to the logic module that you will choose, of course, when you will expand with the appropriate one. So if you are using, for example, the 230 logic module, you have to expand using these, either DM8 230 or DM16 230. You cannot use this or this. Yeah. So we have, once we choose a logic module, we have to expand with its appropriate expansion modules. Okay, now this is about the digital expansion modules. Let's have a look at the analog expansion modules. For analog, we have actually two analog input modules, two different modules, and one analog output modules, always having two channels. That's why it's called AM2. And just like before, just slightly different, power supply is always there, so you must supply each module independently. But the input or output channels are always at the bottom here for analog. And of course we have the run stop LED, and again, just like before, the slide interlock to connect the module to the left. And regarding analogs, you can see that these are the three different modules that we have. This one and this one are analog inputs. This one is the analog output. And the difference here is only on the range between these two. So this will support the voltage and current measurement as well, either 0 or 4 to 20 milliamp. Similar to the analog output, that will support also the same range of output. This one is specifically to connect PT100 RTD temperature probes, either 2 or 3 wire connection. So this is also supported in LOGO. Okay, so this is all about the expansion modules. Now let's jump to the supplementary modules that we have seen before. Now we have seen that we have a switch module in the design of LOGO, and this switch module actually have 4 different RJ45 ports. 3 of them you cannot actually see because they are here at the bottom. So they are wired from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, and we have one on the front. This is actually to connect an engineering station, for example. So this port is left as a service port. Yeah. And the switch is a basic and managed switch, but industrial grade, of course, that can run up to 100 megabit per second. It has the very nice diagnostics, so the voltage supply availability here and the status of each interface. And it comes actually in 2 versions for flexibility. So it can be a 1224 volt DC, or it can be 110 and 220 volt AC or DC. So this allows you to use the appropriate switch module with the appropriate with the logic module that you are using, which is suitable for your application. Again, it's in the logo design, so it suits the distribution boards, but also it can be used as a standalone, so it doesn't have to be with logo. So if you need a switch, a simple basic switch inside the distribution board, then this will do the job. Power supply connectivity here is via a terminal block, removable terminal block, and it can be mounted on a DIN rail or even a wall mount. So it can be mounted directly on a wall. Alright, so that was the switch. Now let's have a look at the power supplies. Now for LOGO, you have always to keep in mind that anything related to LOGO is basic, is simple, and it is in the low power range. We are not talking about huge applications here, very simple, small applications. So the power supplies for LOGO usually distinctive by a narrow width design. So starting from 18 mm, so this is almost 2 centimeters up to 72 mm for the bigger one in width, which is quite impressive. Here you can see the connectivity of the AC, and even though it's supposed to be basic power supply, but it has a lot of nice features like a wide range AC or DC input. So irrespective of what is the supply, whether it is DC, AC, 110 or 230, the power supply would work. This, of course, makes it easier to keep stock. Output, we have two terminals on the output side, and we have many variants of this power supply with different voltage output range. We have with 5 volt output DC, 12, 15 and 24. Of course, what is intended to be used with LOGO is the 12 and 24, but the 5 and 15 are there if required for special applications. The diagnostics for the DC OK LED, and we have here the potentiometer for adjustment of the output voltage. So after switching on the power supply for the first time, we always adjust this potentiometer and measure the output voltage here and make sure this is 24 volt or maybe higher than that based on whatever requirement we have. Then an interesting thing is this is relatively new, which is that we can measure the output current which the power supply is supplying the loads by measuring the millivolt reading on this terminal over here. So this is a very nice feature that will allow you to know exactly when your system is up and running how much exactly I am consuming. Am I close to the rated value of the power supply? Maybe I'm not really utilizing the power supply. Maybe I can use smaller power supplies in the future and save money. So this is very interesting. You can just have your multimeter connected to this terminal and the common pointing to a millivolt reading, and if 50 millivolt reflects the rated output current. So if this is a 4 amp power supply, for example, so if you read 50 millivolt, then your output current is 4 amps. If you read 25 millivolt, then it's 2 amps. And similarly for all other values. In addition, for the power supplies, also for all the LOGO components, we need no clearance on the side of the modules, so what we call side-by-side mounting across the entire temperature range, so without constraint on the operating temperature. And the standard power supply runs up to 70 degrees. This is the standard one, not a special one. In addition, so before you have seen that all LOGO components can be mounted either on a DIN rail or a wall mount, and this is a withdrawable hanger for the wall mounting. So if it is on a DIN rail, this is not visible. If it is on the mounting on a wall, then this is retractable and you mount the screws using them. And this is actually the different power supplies that we have. So this, what you see here, is a very, very close visual of the actual width of the power supply. So from 18 mm to 72 mm, this is very close to the actual size of the power supply. And you can see here, depending on the output voltage, what variants we have. So we have on the 24 volt side from 0.6 up to 4 amps, and on the 12 volts from 0.9 to 4.5. You can see that this is a very nice, interesting, let's say, collection of power supplies up to the 100 watt range. So this is maximum 4 amps. An interesting thing, which is also relatively improved with the latest product release, is the efficiency of this power supply. So even though it's considered as a basic power supply, now we can expect 90% or more efficiency on the power conversion, which is rarely found in a basic power supply. Another thing also that has been improved is the no load power loss, which is now less than 0.3 watt. And last is the feature of having a power reserve during startup, keeping in mind that the loads might have inrush currents during switch on, so the power supply is capable of supplying these inrush currents within its hardware. So it will allow to exceed the rated ampere outage for a very small amount of time, which is for the inrush current, so it will not cause any disturbance in the system. Alright, so this is all about the power supplies. Now I jump to the communication expansion modules, and we have actually two expansion possibilities with LOGO. The one that I'm going to talk about is the remote control and monitoring for LOGO using the CMR communication modules. The other one is using LOGO in a KNX network. KNX, for those who don't know, there is a protocol well known in the building automation industry. So we do have a communication module that can make LOGO as a KNX device in the KNX network. But my focus here is on the CMR, which allows monitoring, alerting, and control of systems which are located, distributed in a vast area via SMS or email. It has the capability of doing time synchronization via either the GPS, because as you see here, this module has a GPS antenna and it has a mobile radio antenna. So you have the option, of course, to use only the mobile interface, or you can use both. So this one allows you to connect to the mobile network, like Do or Etisalat, for example, in the UAE. And this allows you to connect to GPS satellites, either for time synchronization or, as we will see, for the location tracking to get the coordinates. So you can get time synchronization in different ways, and of course you synchronize the time of the CMR, and at the same time you synchronize the time of the LOGO logic module, which is connected to it. As we said, position detection using the GPS, if you are using it, very interesting in tracking applications. It can be used, this CMR, if there is no LOGO involved, no LOGO logic module. It can be used as a standalone because it has two digital inputs, two digital outputs over here. If your application is to monitor one signal or monitor and control one or two signals, then this might be all you need. It can be a standalone, monitoring these inputs and controlling these outputs. You can see we have several LEDs for the diagnostics regarding the supply voltage or the Ethernet port status. The Ethernet port is here. This is, of course, the Ethernet port is what connects to the logic module, LOGO logic module. And you can see the LEDs for the IOs as well. And you can see also the signal strength of the mobile network that you are connected to. And lately, now we have the possibility of establishing an open VPN into this CMR, and therefore we can have remote access directly from any computer on the internet that has an open VPN client. In this case, the CMR is the OpenVPN server, and any PC that needs to connect must run an OpenVPN client software. And last thing is that configuration of this CMR is done via a web interface. So similar to your router at home, for example, you connect to the Ethernet port, and using a web browser, you enter the default IP address of this CMR and you start configuring the device. Let's see an application example of the CMR so you can have the full picture here. Suppose that we want that this CMR and the logo logic module has to be configured via a computer which is remotely located over the internet. So this is how it will look. This is the logo logic module, this is the CMR, and they are connected over Ethernet, located in the same location. And this one has a GPS antenna, mobile antenna. It connects to the mobile network, and any PC connected to the internet, in this case, that has the capability of establishing an open VPN tunnel, this orange line here, this is a VPN tunnel, can establish the connection here, and it allows the following. It allows calling the web interface of this CMR. So if you want to change the configuration of the CMR, maybe you want to add new SMSs or emails to the configuration. It allows you also, if you assign the IP address of this CMR as a router in this logic module, you can also reach the web server of this logo logic module. And also recently we had the option also of remote download of logo programs remotely via this OpenVPN tunnel. So these three things that you can do once this OpenVPN tunnel is established, which is, I mean, in terms of benefit, of course, reducing the cost of travel, of course, and reduces the downtimes and the time that you need to do any modification or change on any system. All right, so this is all about the CMR. Now you see that we have covered almost everything in the product portfolio logo. Let's have a look at some of the really interesting innovations within the logo as a system. In terms of communication, logo now, because it has an Ethernet port, is capable of doing a lot of things. So we can do logo to logo communication. We can do logo to an HMI. So aside from the logo text display, we can connect logo to any standard HMI that we have, or any SCADA system for that matter. That is also possible. In addition, we can do logo to S7 controller. Any S7 PLC in our family, we can interface logo with. We can do Modbus TCP/IP, either client or server. Multiple connections can be done with logo. And we can connect logo to the access tool, logo access tool. This is for retrieval of logs from logo. And of course, we use it for time synchronization. This Ethernet port, we use it for time synchronization with a time saver. Now the display for logo is also has been innovated. For logo and the text display, the display is always 6 lines, but the width is different. So for logo, it's 16 characters. For the text display, is 20 characters. However, both of them, you can, this is very interesting, you can control the color of the background between 3 different colors. This is very useful if you want to indicate some warning or error status of logo. If you are also interested, you can have it configured in the program to have it flashing, so switching on and off the color. And the logo text display specifically has actually 2 Ethernet connections, not one, to give more flexibility of connecting more devices. So whenever there is a text display available, you will connect, of course, the Ethernet cable between the logic module and the text display, and then because we have 2 Ethernet connections on the text display, you have one port available if you want to connect a service laptop or maybe connection going somewhere else. And the text display, of course, has 4 function keys which are freely configurable inside the software to do certain tasks. In the same manner, actually, these buttons also on the logo integrated display are also available in the software that we call them cursor keys, and we can configure them to do certain tasks in the program as well. Another nice feature is the integrated web server of Logo. This means that if you are connected to the Ethernet port of Logo and you try to reach the IP address of Logo over a web browser, you have predefined web pages that makes the web server of Logo, and by default, without doing anything, it gives you the option of displaying the same display messages you configure for the integrated display or the logo text display. So you can duplicate this display, you see it in your laptop, so whatever is coming there will come to you, and also it allows to duplicate the control of the buttons. So these cursor keys or the function keys of the text display can also be operated remotely from this web server when you are sitting on a web client, of course. Now, in addition to that, it allows you to design your own web pages with own graphics and icons using this Logo web editor, free software that we have, and this does not require any HTML knowledge at all. So it's a very simple, you remember the secret behind Logo, that it is quite simple. So it's a simple software. You design your web pages and you run it on Logo. So anybody who reaches this web server of Logo would also, aside from these functions which are by default, can see also your web pages, and you can see some dynamics and some graphics come to life. Last thing is that here you can see the micro SD slot that we talked about. This is, as we mentioned, not mandatory. It's optional for certain tasks, such as uploading or loading the program to Logo. Probably this is very useful if you have so many identical units and you want to copy the program to several Logo logic modules. You can copy them very easily. And again, this is not a special micro SD card. This is any micro SD card available in the market. There is no special one. And also, it's very useful when you are doing data logging. So we have a data logging option inside Logo, and we need this power supply for it to work. So this memory card. All right, let's see from the software side, which is Logo Soft Comfort. This is the software that we use to configure Logo projects. What are the innovations? Now, the last one, as we said, it's version 8.2, and it allows simple programming of the Ethernet communication. It allows automatic assignment of the IP addresses to the devices that you add into the project. And it allows you also to upload programs. If you don't have a program, don't worry, you can connect to the logo device, and you can upload the program to your computer. In addition to many other functions that allows you to do certain applications within logo. And as you can see that in addition to the single diagram mode, which is working on one logo logic module, it also gives you the option to do a network of up to 16 devices, whether they are logo or S7 device or Modbus device. And you can at the same time engineer or configure 3 different logic modules. Let me zoom in, then you can see. Yeah, so this is how it looks. So you can, this is network mode, this is what we are talking about, that you can insert now devices, multiple devices, and you can see now these are 3 different logo logic modules that are somehow interconnected in the functionality. So the functionality is a few signals, maybe signals from here are going there, and you can see this, that we can partition now the diagram area into 3 different parts. So the program of this one is here, the program of this one is this one, and the program of the third one is here. And you can program all 3 all together without switching between screens and so on. So this is interesting, and the interesting part is that after you are done, you don't have 3 projects, you have only 1 project. So you save it. This is completely one project file, not 3. This is the interesting thing. And of course, the software is available completely as a demo software, with the only limitation is that you cannot use it to download or upload from logo. So you can fully use it to learn and build your application and test your application using the simulation option available in the software, but the only limitation is that you cannot actually load it to the logo. For that, you need the licensed version of the software. And finally, this is how, let's say, maybe the overall logo concept looks like. And you can see that in addition to the logo module, we can have a switch module, a power supply, this is a text display, and maybe this is the KNX communication module connecting to KNX actuators and sensors, and maybe we have the CMR communication module, which allows remote control and monitoring with the smartphones or tablet PCs, for example. So this is an overview of the overall components. And one important thing that we did not mention up to now is what is the maximum configuration of logo. So what's the actual limit? And the actual limit of a single logo is as follows: 24 digital inputs, 20 digital outputs, 8 analog inputs, and 8 analog outputs. And if you have a certain project with more IOs, you can network different logic modules, what we call a network operation, and you can reach up to 88 digital inputs, 84 digital outputs, 40 analog inputs, and 24 analog outputs. So this is the limit for a single logo or a combination of network logos. You cannot go beyond that. Okay, so just to have a summary of what are the most typical applications where logo is used. We see it a lot on the simple machinery like the packaging or the garbage compactors. It's for simple conveyor applications, sorting plants, and so on. It's very common for pump stations, for compressor, pump sets and compressor sets, for fans, for HVAC applications, and it's commonly used in the building automation as well, for blind control, for the heat control systems, as we said, in the HVAC, the door and access control and so on. And also for home automation, let's say, some people also not, I mean, sometimes it's not even companies that are buying logo. Individuals are buying logo. They are doing home automation projects with it for access control, swimming pools, saunas, and so on. So it is really versatile in its use, but again for simple applications. Now I'll give you just a small heads up for the future of logo that will be available soon by the end of this year, which is logo 8.3, the next version of logo, which we will have a direct connectivity to the cloud. Now we are in the age of digitalization, so the new logo will have a support of connecting to cloud systems like a MindSphere, which is our own cloud, or any other cloud like Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. And for connected to the cloud, of course, we use MQTT protocol, which is the well-known protocol for cloud connectivity. We will have also an interesting option of visualizing the data that we are sending to the cloud using the Logo Web Editor software to create dashboards. And of course, if you are worried about the security, of course, MQTT is used with TLS encryption, so the communication is always secured with the cloud. So this is just a heads up to know the future of logo. So in addition to all the highlights and innovations that we have mentioned, also by this year we will also have the logo smart enough to be connected to the cloud as well for IoT applications. Alright, so this is the end of the presentation.